Hello and welcome. It is another rousing edition of the Inside Mizzou Athletics Podcast. I am Matt Michaels. Hello to you, and hello to Brad Tregnago, too.
Hello to you. And as you can tell from the weather this week that's already here and what's arriving, it's baseball season, baby.
It's always baseball season. I promise you, the first series of the year that Missouri baseball leaves for, it is either below freezing or snowing when the team leaves town. And this year it will be both. Heading to a little bit nicer climes, but
yeah, good for you, man. You've earned that. You've put in some time. Now you get to experience some experience at some different places, and hopefully get some wins down there too.
That's part of casual. Well, Tuesday afternoon as we record this right now, because I've got to pack other stuff. I'm like, no, we're casual on the podcast today. I'm sporting my lovely Mizzou wheelchair basketball hoodie. So shout out to Coach Likens and company over there at the rec center, and also my good friend Sheena Rice, who hooked me up some time ago with the comfiest hoodie I have.
It does look comfy. Make sure to pack your sunscreen, by the way, whenever you hit the road.
I mean, are you concerned for some reason? You want me to look like a headlight when I come back?
Well, I don't want you to, man, to have all the stuff. You don't. It's got to be bizarre if you come back with a sunburn in February. Like, what would that say? People would have no sympathy.
It would be
for
bizarre for Missouri. It wouldn't be bizarre for, like, Denver.
No sympathy for you if that happened to you.
Okay, yeah. We can talk a little bit about international traveler over here, but we'll first remind you that our friends at Shelter Insurance power the podcast. You know that Shelter's ranked number one in customer satisfaction for auto insurance in the Central region by J.D. Power 6 of the last 7 years. We're your shield. We're your shelter. And Tiger fans, you should say aloha to Hawaiian Bros, where the island-inspired flavors are positively delicious. You'll love favorites like Huli Huli Chicken, Luau Pig, and the delectable Dole Soft Serve. Hawaiian Bros is just south of campus on Grindstone Parkway, or order at hawaiianbros.com.
We have some Hawaii-related content on the podcast today, and we'll get to that coming up in a bit.
Are you telling me that you have a luau set out back and that we get to feast after the recording is done?
Well, we call it in the biz a tease, Matt, and you don't necessarily know what it is. You got to stick around.
I don't want to be teased. I want the action. I want it right now.
It could be a luau. There could be, it could be something grass skirt related. It could be related to a Mizzou sport. I don't know. You'll have to stick around and find out.
Okay, that's enough. He's not giving up the beans quite yet. We will talk hoops to start off this podcast. No guest for us today. It's that traveling time of season. We got so much to talk about anyways. And the thing that we have to talk about first isn't on the bright side, at least that most fans would look at it. Mizzou men's hoops, and I want to put this in perspective, lost to two top 10 teams over the span of a week on February the 5th and the 8th by a total of 7 points, 85-81 on the road at number 4 Tennessee, 67-64 on a last seconds shot by Wade Taylor, who's in his 87th year at Texas A&M. You look at those games, and you can choose to say one of two things. Either, oh no, the men's basketball team has lost a couple of games in a row. It seems like momentum has disappeared, and for some people, the sky may be falling. Or you can say, you needed Tennessee to play a very, very efficient half of basketball to beat you, even though you had a lead on the road, and it went away in the second half, and you had a comeback from an early hole against a Texas A&M team that defensively is usually very stout, and were able to put yourself in position to get the win, and the other team made plays against you. However you want to choose to synthesize this, and I will choose the latter, Brad, it should still remain that Missouri men's basketball is in a very good position for all the things they want at the end of the season. The reality of this league is, and we said it months ago, you're going to lose in the Southeastern Conference, and Missouri's recent schedule of 4 AP-ranked opponents in a row and 2 top 10 opponents in a row, unfortunately dropping the last 2, tells you what we meant when we said that a long time ago, because something like this was inevitable.
Well, you never want to go 0-2 in a week. That's understandable. But like you said, I mean, you're talking about two, as of Monday, they're top 8 opponents that you went up against. One of those 2 on the road. You were very much in both of those games. And like you said, lost by a combined 7 points in those 2 contests. I mean, Wade Taylor, he's been in college. It was Wade Taylor the 4th. He's been in college so long that when he started, they were actually using Roman numerals. That was like the default number system. It wasn't
I'll allow it.
It wasn't just the IV at the end of his his name. But yeah, big time shot from him, and you got to give him credit. He's a really good player. He made a really good play in a clutch moment, and so is still after that. You're sitting at 6-4 in the best league in the country. You're 17-6 overall. You've got that non-conference win against Kansas is still they haven't been quite as good as they've been in past years. Darn it, but that's still going to look really good whenever you come to Selection Sunday. So you're still in a really good in a good spot. You still have an opportunity for a top 4 spot in the SEC in a double bye. It's going to be harder now for sure, but it's certainly not off the table. And, relatively speaking, the final, 8 games in conference play are not as hard as what you've gone through in the first 10. I mean, you've still got some doozies, Alabama being one of them, but you've got some opportunities here to still finish this season strong, put yourself in position at least to be in that conversation for a double bye, and then to see where the chips fall when the NCAA tournament committee takes a look at you.
I will make it a matter of semantics here, and maybe just to play devil's advocate, I don't think it's a matter of this road being harder. I think it takes what it takes in the SEC this season, right? And so what does it take? 10 or 11 wins to be considered a top 4 seed. I think the 10, maybe 10, I think certainly 11 can get you to the top 4 because the nature of this league is butting heads all the time. And a team like Auburn, which did take its first loss here since the last time we recorded the podcast, maybe they are head and shoulders above. If you're head and shoulders above in this league, you're a number 1 seed in the Big Dance without question from anybody. To me, the road from the beginning of this stretch against these 4 ranked teams was always going to be similar. It's just a matter of where you get the wins, because I don't feel like a matchup against Oklahoma, which is coming up next on Wednesday night at Mizzou Arena, I don't feel that that's significantly different from Texas A&M, even though the number and the metrics in front of A&M's name might be stronger than those of Oklahoma's. Like, I don't view any games in the league that way. Maybe there are a couple where you say, okay, this team has struggled this year. The LSUs and the South Carolinas, as we look back, maybe they are not able to keep up to pace. But I say every game you play, you can win. Every game you play, you can get beat. Just rack them up. And don't worry about who they come 2-4 against, whatever the case may be. But with that said, if you think about matchups that for Missouri maybe take the Tigers out of their comfort zone, we could use 20/20 vision in hindsight and say, yeah, 2 of the best defensive teams in the country against a team that likes to go fast and wasn't always able to do it against those 2. You could see in hindsight where maybe the Tigers would have struggled with this. And the good part about it is you still find yourself as an AP top 25 team. You still find yourself on the top line of an NCAA tournament if it was to begin today. And oh, by the way, you still have opportunities to rack up wins in the best doggone conference of the country. So I think that it just takes what it takes in terms of the wins and losses. And it's not any more difficult now than it was, because in the end, I'm not going to care who it was against. If I've got 10 or 11 wins in this league, I feel like I'm a top 4 seed in a double bye in Nashville, and I feel like I'm a top 4 seed then in the NCAA tournament too. That's how I look at it.
Speaking of the AP top 25, so Mizzou dropped from 15 to 21, which honestly seemed a little harsh to me.
That was egregious to me.
Considering, I mean, you did lose twice, but both of the losses were at a very high level, so that I was a little surprised by that. But the AP poll doesn't necessarily matter at the end of the day. But look at the top of the poll. Auburn and Alabama are essentially co-number 1s. It's really close how tight they are. Auburn is the number 1 team. Alabama's just under them at number 2. As it turns out, they play each other in Tuscaloosa. So that's going to be the game of the weekend from a national perspective before we see the Alabama Crimson Tide coming up a little bit down the road. Florida is number 3 in the country after winning at Auburn. Tennessee is number 5. We already told you Texas A&M is number 8. So that's a little bit of perspective, again, of what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a conference with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8 place teams in the entire nation. So to what you said, I mean, if you can find your way back into that top 4, which, again, I think is a possibility when you look at the schedule coming up. It's not going to be easy, but it's in play. If you're able to pull that off, then yeah, I think you absolutely have a really strong argument to also be a top 4 seed in an NCAA tournament region.
Tiger fans, say aloha to Hawaiian Bros, where the island-inspired flavors are positively delicious. You'll love favorites like Huli Huli Chicken, Luau Pig, and the delectable Dole Soft Serve. Hawaiian Bros, just south of campus on Grindstone Parkway, or order at hawaiianbros.com.
And I think a couple of things from the game against Texas A&M could be instructive. These are things that I'm watching for with this team going forward, one of which is Jacob Cruz. If the Tigers do not have 3 straight threes, the last one was a true heat check right down the well, in the first half from Jacob Cruz against A&M, the margin of that game might have been different. The tenor of how we look at maybe how that game played out might be different. But he was an important factor, and an important factor down low. He was getting some rebounds in that game. And by the way, so was Marcus Allen, who changed the game in the second half with his rebounding presence. He only scored 2 points, but he got 6 rebounds. The Tigers will probably not have matchups that are disadvantaged as much as they could be against Tennessee and A&M when it comes to the glass and the overall defense, like I talked about before. But those 2 players made a difference, and it will be important, I think, to see them continue to make a difference going forward. And what's more, Missouri, and this is one of the highest numbers of the season to my recollection, Brad, they had 17 fast break points in that game against Texas A&M. So eventually the adjustment was, we have to beat this pressure defense just by getting down the floor quicker than we even normally do, and they had success doing that. Will they want to play that game in a track meet with Alabama in a couple of games? Maybe not. But with everybody else, I could see that being something that Missouri could use to its advantage on the steal and the run out. It's the one part of their game that they had a couple years ago that team scored in transition all the time, that this one hasn't had as much of, but we saw it against the Aggies, and I'm interested to see if we have more of that as we close the stretch.
We think about fast breaks and that alley-oop with a minute to go from Warwick to Bates. I mean, the guts to be able to throw that oop and to be able to finish it, to give Mizzou a lead briefly there. I mean, what a cool moment, and it's unfortunate that, you know, Mizzou ultimately lost the game, and just the way that it goes, that plays like that can get kind of lost to history if you lose the game. But what a cool moment that was, and a sold-out crowd and a sold-out atmosphere there. But, you know, reframing it a different way, you're going up against what is now the number 8 team in the country. Your 2 best players did not play anywhere near their best games. Caleb Grill was 0 for 4 from 3, only scored 4 points. Tamar Bates did score 16, but he was 5 of 17 from the field to get there.
I feel like that might be his least efficient game of the season. Certainly his least efficient in which he scored double digits.
Well, and he's a 50, 40, 90 guy in terms of percentages, so he's normally a very efficient scorer. Didn't work out that way against an elite defense, you know, on Saturday. But your 2 best players were both way off, and it took a 3 basically at the buzzer to beat you from a top 10 team in the nation. So that's another way to kind of think about this. And, you know, the Tennessee game, a Volunteers team that normally does not shoot very well from 3, was better than 60% from 3 at home and only beat you by 4. I mean, so again, it's not just top 10 teams pulling out wins against you. It's top 10 teams that are having to either do something out of the ordinary on offense or do something out of the ordinary maybe on defense to be able to take you down. And I think it speaks to also, you know, the depth from Mizzou. You mentioned Cruz, you know, hitting all those big shots. He had that ridiculous fadeaway down the stretch too, to also, you know, keep Mizzou within striking distance after getting down 12-0 right off the bat, able to fight their way back and finally take a lead in the second half. Marcus Allen had 6 rebounds. He also had that tough floater with about 9 minutes left to give us a lead. Yeah, just a clutch bucket from a true freshman in that moment. So that was really exciting to see.
First lead of the game on that bucket.
So it's going to be different guys on different days and different nights. They're going to be able to deliver for this team, and so that's why I almost come away more encouraged after those 2 games than I was before them, because you saw that, hey, you can go toe-to-toe with these elite teams, and even when critical aspects are off for you or on in an uncommon way for them, you're still right in the fight.
I can think of it another way entirely, which is to say, hey, listen, this Missouri team had a couple that it dropped, but it finds itself in a place where it takes March-level performances from other teams to beat it.
Exactly.
And we are not yet in March. We are not yet where everybody you presume, will have peaked. Now, if Texas A&M and Tennessee keep going on a rocket ship up, well, it might be difficult to catch them. But we've seen March-level performances from Missouri. Maybe the best one of the season was on the road at Florida, because we saw what Tennessee did in that place. They did nothing at all against Florida at their building. So it is to say that you just need to see the representative performances that you know will be required to survive and advance when it is a one-and-done situation. We've seen that from Missouri. We've seen that now from two of their opponents in quick succession. Fair game, right? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You'd much rather have been on the downside here in the first and second weeks of February than you would in the second weekend of March.
And now you come into a week with, Oklahoma at home, at Georgia, two teams that are certainly not bad. They're not at the level of Tennessee and Texas A&M, though, I think it's fair to say. And let's see how things look against those two folks and where they stand a week from now, and if they're still, in that conversation for, whatever may be coming up down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. So good times ahead. Bradley is looking forward to his attendance on Wednesday night, because I will be somewhere else, and he'll have the wrap-up show for me with Coach David Nutt, which you will enjoy across the Central Bank Tiger Network.
Looking forward to it.
He said dramatically. By the way, congratulations to the women's basketball team for taking a road victory in I would say, a convincing fashion, being tied at the break, coming out and doubling up your opponent in the third quarter, 24-12, and earning a very solid victory at Texas A&M on Sunday. So I guess everybody can thank you, Brad, personally for the revenge. Grace Slaughter scored 29 and had something to do with it, too. 69-59 the final. But we have seen this in, the last 3 weeks, I would say, from the women's basketball team. Performances much more representative of the abilities of the players. There had been a couple in the early season that were very difficult games against very highly rated opponents, but Mizzou has played representative games against tough opponents in this stretch, and they've also pulled out a couple of wins, one at the Horn and this one in maybe a more conventional fashion, which I'm sure lifts the sails of Coach P and everybody on the team.
I would thank Grace Slaughter a little more than you thank me for the win, but yes, I appreciate you. I appreciate the sentiment.
Said she had something to do with it.
I appreciate the sentiment, but yeah, the last 5 games, this team has had a really solid stretch. And I know it's weird to say when you go 2-3 in that stretch, but the losses were Texas on the road, Tennessee and LSU at home. All 3 of those teams are legit, Sweet 16 at least contenders, and all 3 of those games were very competitive deep into the game, and a couple of them were single digits. I think LSU wound up being an 11-point game, but it was closer than that for the majority of the contest. So, and then you bookended that with a buzzer-beating win against a Mississippi State team that's probably in the field of 68 right now, and a win against a Texas A&M team that while they are struggling a little bit right now, that's still a road game. So to be able to pick up a conference road game, always a big thing. Grace Slaughter, obviously 29 points on 17 shots. She was tremendous. But Demila Brown was everywhere in that game, and she deserves a ton of credit. She's 5'7". She got 3 offensive rebounds. I'm not really sure how, but she was throwing her body around all over the place, not just on the glass, but forcing turnovers in a variety of ways. One of the best plays of the game was about midway through the third quarter. A&M tries to throw an inbounds pass on a baseline out of bounds play. She taps it into the backcourt, into A&M's backcourt, beats the A&M players down the floor, grabs it, makes the layup, and gets fouled. Just a tremendous individual effort and such an energizing play for the team, and the Tigers kind of took off from there and never really looked back. So, yeah, did a great job of taking care of business, and we'll see how it looks going forward. Oklahoma is the next opponent coming up on Sunday, and the Sooners are a nationally ranked team. Mizzou lost by 17 there, but again, like you mentioned, Mizzou just the women's team feels like it's in a different and a better place than they were when that game was played in Norman. Oklahoma just played Auburn on Monday night at home, and an Auburn team that's struggling this year and only beat them by 2. So hopefully the teams are going in different directions, to be honest, and I expect a competitive game coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, I think what we've seen, there is something that has clicked or just come together in a way maybe it didn't earlier in the season for this group, and now they can carry that into a couple straight at home. Oklahoma, then Kentucky, at Ole Miss. Never an easy trip, but you have an opportunity to play your way into a place where maybe you get a little bit more favorable matchup when you head out east to the SEC Women's Tournament. And again, the nature of that event now is that more teams are playing on day one. You might have to fight through more to get to the ultimate prize, but you can give yourself a head of steam going into that event. And as we've seen before, sometimes you don't always want the bye in some of those tournaments. I still think you want the double bye. The single bye you might not want.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, at one point, if you finish last in the conference and you're the 16 seed, you have to win 5. If you're in the bottom half of the league now, you have to win 5 times in 5 days. The 16 seed at one point was going to have to play Tennessee. So that's where to start. And then it gets harder after that. So it gives you some perspective on, yes, there's still a lot to play for. There's certainly value in moving as far up the ladder as you possibly can to give yourself the best chance to go. Mizzou's pretty much locked in the fact they're going to have to win 5 times in 5 days. That's the reality of it if they want to make the NCAA tournament. But they're in a spot right now the last couple of weeks where they've really found some success. They went to a really small lineup, which was kind of interesting. A lot in the second half during that run. It was Brown and Slaughter, and then Abby Schreck, who's a good outside shooter at a wing, Avery Kroenke at the point, who does a great job of not turning the ball over, and I guess Ashton Judd by default was the center. I was talking to her post-game, and she said, yeah, I didn't expect to be playing a lot of the 5 spot whenever I came to college, but here we are. But that really small lineup can be challenging for teams that have more, conventional bigs, because you've got, 4 really good shooting threats, and Kroenke has gotten better from the outside too. So who do you put your, lumbering 6'5" post player on? There's really not a solution on that end. So it worked well against A&M. I'm curious to see what that looks like maybe going forward.
Yeah, we'll have opportunities to see it. It's amazing to think that we are in the twilight of these basketball seasons, but just 5 games left in the regular season for Mizzou women's hoops, and 2 straight at home, and then, of course, the season finale against Vanderbilt on March the 2nd, a chance to get out to Mizzou Arena and see that crew. Much more has happened. The Diamonds have begun. A very good weekend for Mizzou softball to talk about coming up. A little bit of a Mizzou baseball preview, and more fun after you hear from our friends here on the podcast. Of course, Shelter Insurance.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics Podcast is brought to you by Shelter Insurance. Ranked number 1 in customer satisfaction for auto insurance in the Central Region by J.D. Power 5 out of the last 6 years. We're your shield. We're your shelter.
And the podcast is also powered by Socket. Socket Fiber is now available, and it is the fastest, most reliable internet combined with local service and simple billing. Contact Socket today for voice data and internet services for your home and business, 1-800-SOCKET3, or visit socket.net. And remember, Sophia's and Addison's restaurants. They're great local spots to visit before or after all Mizzou home games. Addison's has 2 locations in Southwest and downtown Columbia and features over 20 beers on tap, including local brewers and, of course, the famous Nachos Bianco. So remember, before or after the game, stop by Addison's.
The only thing faster than a heater from CC Harrison is Socket.
Well, she's got a 2-0 record. Mizzou softball goes 4-1 in their opening Clearwater weekend at the NFCA event. Their second Clearwater weekend is to come at the Shriners Children's event, and they will have a midweek against UCF as well in the Sunshine State. So they've got a busy trip. They've got the long 10, 11-day trip Mizzou softball does. 4-1 with the Inside Mizzou Athletics Podcast bump alive and well, not just because Julia Crenshaw hit a home run that ended up being the run rule difference against Marshall in the opening game of the season, a 9-1 victory for the Black and Gold, but also because she kind of, if you were paying attention, put out a guarantee on our podcast last week that Missouri would handle its business against Duke, and for a while it was looking like they would not handle their business against Duke. Cassidy Curd is still really good. She gave Missouri fits in that super regional. She gave Missouri fits for 5 innings, but she could not pitch past 5 innings, or at least did not pitch past 5 innings. And when she was removed, Missouri put up a 2-out rally for the ages. It ended as a 9-run 6th. Missouri got the victory 10-3 over Duke after trailing going into those final 2 innings. And with the only blemish being a walk-off Notre Dame victory that I think was unexpected in so many different ways.
There's got to be a letdown, though. I mean, and no disrespect. I know that Mizzou, they take every opponent seriously and they're bringing it, but it's just human nature. You get that emotional win against Duke, and then you have to turn around and play Notre Dame immediately. I mean, you got to think that played in a little bit.
Could it have? perhaps, I think we saw across college softball the parity that the transfer portal and that NIL have brought to the sport. It used to be, and again, at the very tippy top, I'm not making excuses here. Until proven otherwise, it's still like Oklahoma, Texas, a lot of the teams in this league, and so on and so forth. There are some clear-cut number ones, but it's not as clear-cut as it used to be, and top 10, top 15, top 25 teams are going down left and right in this first flurry of games. So for Missouri to come out with a 4-1 record, by the way, a late surge and a comeback against Iowa in their finale. They blanked Northwestern in the second game on Friday, impressively behind Harrison, who threw a 3-hitter. That was a 3-0 win, if I'm not mistaken. And you look at the numbers by the time it's all said and done. Missouri has 5 who batted over 300 for the weekend, including all-tournament team member Stefania Abriscato, who's on a 5-game hit streak. Spoiler alert, they only played 5 games, so do the math. She was fantastic and leads the team with 12 total bases. And Madison Walker almost hit 300 on the weekend. She hit 294, but she was second with 11 total bases on the team, which told you just how good she was hitting for her power numbers. With 5 knocks and 11 total bases means that she was getting the extra base quite a bit. Everything in terms of earned run average looks pretty representative, except for maybe Taylor Pinnell, because Notre Dame got hot against her in a walk-off victory. But Pinnell was able to also earn a win on the weekend in that matchup against Iowa, where the Tigers were down late and came back. I see nothing in the results from this weekend that disabuse me of the notion, Brad, that this is a team with top-end potential. This is a team with potential top 10 written on it, and maybe with staying power for the season, and they will get a great chance to prove that right from the jump in Clearwater when they play the Florida State Seminoles on Thursday.
I think it's fair to have had some questions about what it was going to look like up the middle. You lose Lauren Krings, who's your ace in the circle. Jenna Laird was a tremendous shortstop here from pretty much the day she set foot on campus. Alex Honnold had some great seasons in center field and hitting the ball. I mean, Honnold and Laird were 1-2 in the lineup. So what was that going to look like when you had to, shuffle some people around and, next women up? And so far, I think you've got a lot of positives coming out of that. I mean, Harrison and Marissa McCann as your 1-2 in the circle. I think you feel pretty good about that. And they've got a lot of different options behind those two. And I'm curious to see who, emerges to kind of help out, along with those two that I mentioned and Pinnell, moving forward in relief. Abriscato obviously hit the heck out of the ball, getting more opportunities to play. And you've got, we talked about Madison Walker already going deep. Abby Hay also was driving in runs all over the place. She was able to hit the long ball as well. So they've got a lot of pieces there that I think you can be encouraged by if you're a Mizzou fan. But like you said, a challenging stretch coming up when they go back to Clearwater for the weekend. Florida State and Clemson are both ranked. You play them back-to-back. That actually comes up on Thursday. So real opportunities there to continue to build up that resume and get a good feel for where you're at here in the early going.
And then after that, the Cathedral City Classic in the desert in California, which they have been really an annual participant in for a long, long time, where they will get some West Coast teams, some more highly ranked teams. This squad will be very tested, and even tested in the 4th weekend in Wichita, Kansas. That weekend's in Wichita here now, where Nebraska will be there, Oklahoma State will be there. Missouri is challenging itself in the non-conference, and the record in non-conference, if it is gaudy, will put Missouri in a place where they could be a top 10 or top 5 team going into the conference season pretty easily. And to do that, you're going to have to rack up some victories against some good teams, but you're also going to try to avoid bad losses, so to speak. I wouldn't necessarily say any loss in first weekend if you go 4-1 is a bad loss. I get it. Sometimes a team walks you off in Notre Dame. We'll see how good the Irish are over the course of the season. But just take care of your business, your expected business. Get some wins over these ranked teams, and by the time you look up, once you go into league play, you'll feel very, very good about yourself, is how I feel about this softball team right now.
Well, and how about the home slate coming with SEC play, with Texas and Oklahoma both coming in? I mean, it's going to be a fun year, as usual, with Mizzou softball.
You know what I also liked? Claire Cahalan, and she had a triple early in the game against Duke that kind of gave Missouri some life. They hadn't had a hit yet off of Kurt in that game, and they did what teams would you would expect to do against Claire Cahalan, especially with someone on base, but there was nobody on base. They played her to slap. They played the slap defense and shaded the outfield to the opposite field. And what did Cahalan do? She was on time and lined one right up the middle. It got past the center fielder. I look at something like that, and a player like Cahalan saying, you have to respect my game by me playing against your defense and putting it in a place that you do not anticipate for me trying to get on base. That's something that some of the best slap hitters that I've seen at Missouri were able to do. Like Rhea Taylor did that on a pretty regular basis where, you're gonna play me to slap this time? No, I'm just gonna hit it into the right center field gap. Cahalan could be a major factor in turning this lineup over the course of the year, and the fact that she had such a good hitting weekend, her OPS was over 1, and she batted well over 350. Keep an eye on that for the softball team as we get into this season.
Well, it's an example of, next woman up stuff. Cahalan, saw a little bit of time, but now she's going to be among those asked to do more. And, if you can get consistent production out of her spot in the lineup with the players that she has around her. Madison Walker's a year older now. Abby Hayes a year older now. I mean, Abby Hay was still hitting baseballs just a couple years ago. I mean, big adjustment to trying to hit off softball pitchers who can move the ball in all kinds of different ways that baseball pitchers cannot. I mean, it's just continued development both at the plate and at the circle, and we'll see how it looks in a few weeks.
And it's not that Cahalan can't still slap and get herself on base. Don't get me wrong. You just add to your arsenal as a team and as an individual, and good things will be happening going forward. We did mention earlier, Brad was trying to cajole me into saying something, I don't know, not that I'd regret, but just wanted to give me junk, basically, for being able to go with the baseball team to Puerto Rico.
I just want to make sure you're packing your sunscreen, man.
Yeah,
I don't want you to get burned.
Right. Yeah,
it's
no,
February.
that's exactly.
You're not used to that.
It's February, and Brad's upset.
And
because
reapply. Make sure to reapply. You can't just do it once early in the morning and think you're fine.
There will be plenty of reapplication. Listen, where Mizzou baseball stands right now is this. They'll play 2 regional teams and a super regional team from last season in their opening weekend of play. Penn State, or in their opening week of play, I should say, when they travel to UCF in the midweek. Penn State is a team that some people have picked as a top 4 team in the Big Ten. Mike Gambino's in his second year there. He took a Boston College team that didn't do a lot before he was there and built that program up to be a consistent player in a very tough league in the ACC. And in the Big Ten, people are expecting big things from his team in his year 2. That's your opener. Then you play against a UConn team that is the prohibitive, I would argue, favorite in the Big East, and a Stetson team that is always a tough out no matter what happens, not just in DeLand, Florida. Yes, that is a Florida team that you will be playing. They probably had some more time outside. Maybe you thank Mother Nature and the snowstorm that wrapped through North Florida at some stage. Maybe they didn't get out as much as they usually would, the Hatters. But that's 1, 2, 3 to start your season. Then on the road at UCF, which will be, I think, a top half of the league Big 12 team this season. You got 4 games right off the jump that will prove to you how you handle business, as Carrick Jackson has been saying, when you get punched in the mouth. He loves the Mike Tyson quote. Everybody's got a plan until they got punched in the mouth. So when you face that first bit of adversity, what does it look like for this team? What I think, from my observation, it will look like, the team seems all together. I think that these players really do enjoy each other's company. The ones who have returned have another year to buy into, no opportunity wasted. And I think that from a tools perspective, this offense will be able to be more situationally sound. They'll be able to get more of the bunts down. They'll be able to run a little bit more than they did last season, even though I know Coach Jackson wanted to. It didn't always play out in practice. We'll have to see some pitchers step up. I think that Coach Jackson on our flagship in Columbia, KTGR, earlier this week said that Ian Losey gets the ball on Friday night. And here's a guy who was injured for parts of the last several seasons, it seems like, but is as healthy as he's ever felt coming into a year. He's the veteran. He gets the ball. And then maybe a Brock Lucas on Saturday, who is expected to step up in his 3rd year in the program. Daniel Whistler, the same deal. I think that Whistler's probably the Sunday starter as of weekend 1. And then a host of freshmen and transfers who will be thrown in the fire right away. Look for names like Will Libbert and Brady Kellenbrink, I would argue, in some form or fashion over these first 4 games. I'm really excited to see what they look like in the early stages. And let's face it, they're never going to make it easy for you when you get to March and you get to the SEC and you open at some people's number 1 team in the nation and some people's national championship pick, the LSU Tigers. So how do you prepare yourself for what the 30 games in the league are going to be in a league where if you find a way to win 16 or 17 games, you're a regional team, almost irrespective of anything you do beforehand. That's how tough the SEC is in baseball, like it is in softball, like it is in men's basketball this year, in women's basketball many years. Your opportunities will come. So how do you take advantage of what you have, play consistently and strong in the first weekend? The wins and losses may fall where they may, but learn about yourself no matter what happens in this first weekend and put together your best effort, and good things should happen for you.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics Podcast is brought to you by Sophia's and Addison's Restaurants. Sophia's and Addison's Restaurants are great local spots to visit before or after all Mizzou home games. Addison's has 2 locations in Southwest and downtown Columbia and features over 20 beers on tap, including local brewers and, of course, their famous Nachos Bianco. So remember, before or after the game, stop by Addison's.
Well, you mentioned getting punched in the mouth, and injury news was kind of a punch in the mouth for the baseball program, both at shortstop and in pitching. So how do you think it looks different, or how has the team reacted from what you've seen to that tough injury news?
It's unfortunate that Javen Pimentel missed the season due to Tommy John surgery. That is something that is not last minute. It has been announced before the season, but it's something that's a known. The team has gone into the season understanding this. With Garrett Goldbeck, the fine transfer who was the junior college Gold Glove winner in Division I last season at Kansas City, Kansas Community College, he will still be able to help this team, but it will be in a hitting role. Would we see Goldbeck at first base? Maybe, but he can't really throw very much right now, so that's about the only place that you could see him. But he has been hitting, and I like his approach at the plate. He really can use all fields. He had an on-base percentage last year at the JUCO level of over 500. That tends to translate your eye from one level to the next, so I'm excited to see how that looks for him. But his teammate, that means, who came with him from KCK Community College, Peyton Basler, might have an opportunity to step up early. Shortstop will be a question for the Tigers. Trey Calloway is a freshman who's got an opportunity at the job. But also we might see Jackson Lovich there the first weekend, and Lovich will probably slot in as a primary third baseman throughout the year. That's where he's been working at. How does it look in the field for a team that expects to be good defensively when one of your better defensive cogs is not able to play out there, and Goldbeck remains to be seen. But it's not something that has been unknown in the preparation for this season in either of those cases. And let's also remember a couple of names that are kind of being forgotten all this. One is Sam Horn. And Sam will go through football, and he will make his way to the baseball diamond in his own time, coming off of Tommy John surgery last season. And a name that I don't hear people talking enough about, both in the national perspective, and even he's kind of being forgotten locally. There's this guy named Tony Newbeck. Do you remember what he did as a freshman? He only went down in his second weekend as a collegian in Monroe, Louisiana on a rainy day. And when you looked up at one point, he had thrown not just an immaculate inning, which is 9 pitches, 9 strikes, 3 strikeouts. He did an immaculate inning plus 1. He did 12 straight. And what was it for the freshman? Most of it was high-riding fastballs, and he challenged everyone. He's got really good stuff. He is on the road to being back sometime in the middle of this season, much like Horn is expected to be. There are not many teams, Brad, in the Southeastern Conference that can say in day one, we expect to have 2 arms that could be weekend caliber starters for us coming back throughout the season. Most of the time, you're losing those guys as the year goes on. And knock on wood, Missouri doesn't have more injury news to that end. But I think this is the club that if it can find out a way to be successful in the image that Coach Jackson wants for them, maybe a little bit more gap to gap, certainly speed on the base paths, and play clean baseball first and foremost. If you get that and you add to it towards the end of the season, that could be a very, very dangerous team. And he says it all the time, and I'll say it here. Missouri lost 14 games by 2 runs or less last season. If you can take those 14 losses and even take half of them, you find yourself in a regional. That's how this league is. And the potential will be there to accomplish those things if this group gels in the way that I think they might. But we haven't seen it yet on the field against good competition, and we will get that from the jump starting in weekend 1.
Make sure you pack a hat, too, along with the sunscreen.
Well, hats normally happen. I got a hat little container, a bag.
Okay, you got that whole thing going on. Do you have are you like a floppy hat guy, or is it
No.
just the
I'm
standard
just
baseball?
I'm wearing ball caps.
Standard ball cap.
Yeah, standard ball. I'm not at floppy hat yet because I feel like floppy hat, that's reserved for like our friend Peter Malnati of the Inside Mizzou Athletics Podcast bum.
Indeed.
But it's not reserved for me. I also feel like the less hair you have, the better a floppy hat is.
I'll have to look into that then.
If you've got a lot of hair, I feel like you need the ball cap to kind of tame. And I just got a haircut, so who am I to say?
That was a smart move.
Yeah, well, we're trying for it anyways. Mizzou Gymnastics went on the road. They claimed some bragging rights back once again from Illinois. Not that they ever left them, but they didn't leave them at Huff Hall in Champaign and Urbana. It was a season-high tying team score of 197-2. It's not that every rotation was perfect, but one rotation was great. Their floor was as good as it's been all year, and those are the sorts of things, again, as you build towards March you want to see, as, of course, the Illini will be a familiar opponent because they've got the Valentine's Day night at the Zoo to the Lou meet in St. Charles, along with a couple others. So conference and non-conference joining together between Florida, Iowa, and Illinois in this one will be fascinating to see how it plays out.
Amari Celestine, career best 39.5 in the all-around, and I was strangely encouraged. I saw the 1972 team score, which is a very solid number, especially for this early in the season. And I was oddly encouraged because Helen Hu looked like a human on the beam. 9.825 was all.
That's like impossible.
Yeah, in quotes, all she did. Because she's been, she's got the perfect 10 already. She's had some 9.975s multiple times. So even though she kind of goes below the expectations that she has set early on, you're still posting a really solid number on the road, against a rival. So, again, I think Mizzou still in a good place. Looking forward to that event on Saturday. You got teams like Alabama coming in along with Illinois, so that'll be a fun one.
Yeah, it shows the depth of your team when you were able to handle business in the way that Missouri did, and we'll get to see it all. I think it's neat that they do this, quad in St. Charles. I think they should make it an annual thing. The Zoo to the Lou series, of course, a big deal over the course of the last year. Why not? And give your fans in that St. Louis area, and all the young fans especially, a chance to not have to drive, an hour and a half to see you compete against SEC and great regional competition as well. I think it's going to be an awesome event on Friday.
Great recruiting opportunity, I'm sure, as well for Coach Welker and crew.
Well, I mean, he knows the area, certainly, to say the least. But if there's any stone that needs to be unturned, I guess you find your way. I said Florida. That was last year's. It is Alabama. Brad got me right. I was wrong. Go ahead and find me sometime after the podcast today. What else has gone on? We know that golfing has happened. Congratulations to the tennis team for some success up north. You should not be able to say the tennis team had success traveling north on the road in the middle of February, but they did.
Well, they have a decent amount of indoor facilities in Minneapolis, as you can imagine. Did lose at Minnesota. That was a tight one. I think it was 5-2 was what the final wound up being. That was on Friday of last week, but then on Sunday, able to sweep both Colorado State and St. Thomas in Minneapolis. So a really nice bounce back there. And then those Tigers will be back home to take on Missouri State and SEMO on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the golfers are in action now. Both will be soon.
Well, we're talking men's golf. Women's golf is a little bit off. Men's golf is the Hawaii Tees. That's where the men's golf team is at the John Burns Intercollegiate in Lihue, Hawaii, which is on the island.
Can you try to say that again?
Lihue. I tried. I did look it up and tried my best, but I'm not exactly.
Bless you for your effort.
I'm not exactly a native to the island. So Lihue, Hawaii, which is on the island of Kauai. That's the action for men's golf this week.
Yeah.
Short, tough draw there, right? And also track and field held their final home meet of the season last Friday. It was the Missouri Invitational. Drew Rogers, personal best, just over 4 minutes in the mile. And the track team splits up. Some are going to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Some are going to Boston this weekend. And swim and dive's been off for a while, but next week it's the SEC Championships in Athens.
Yeah, women's golf will have their spring opener on February 23rd through the 24th in Peoria, Arizona. It's like just taking a spring training game, get a little bit of casual golf in, no big problem. And by the way, that is the same next week that we'll have to talk about in a preview for Mizzou Wrestling in their final home meet, a senior night. It's only Iowa State. I mean, it's a tough assignment, but it is Keegan O'Toole bobblehead night. Hope is that you don't just get to see the bobblehead. You might get to see the man himself on the mat, and Missouri will try to make it a good finale at home as they go into what will be a tough road ahead in Tulsa. But if there's ever a team that can go out there and put some people on their backs, it's Missouri's Tiger-style wrestling team. With all the stuff that has gone on this season, you've always got a chance when they give you that opportunity in March.
Yeah, Brian Smith's on about a 3-week stretch. His team is of rest and hopefully getting healthy in time for the stretch run.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we got healthy on the podcast today because we went through about all of it.
We got it done. We'll see how things look next week. To be determined plans there with Matthew on the road for a while, but we'll figure something out for you.
Yeah, we endeavor a podcast. I think we'll be able to get that done for everybody, much like this, just kind of get the rundown of what's going on in a busy, busy time for Mizzou Athletics, and look forward to seeing all the fans who will come out certainly on Wednesday night for that game against Oklahoma and throughout here on the course of the week. So that's it for this week. Thanks so much to Andrew Bristow for being with us, as always, as a great producer of the podcast. And thanks to you for listening. For Brad Tregnago, I'm Matt Michaels. Until next time, we'll see you here on the Inside Mizzou Athletics Podcast.